and student view. Okay, ready? Here we go. So you can, I'll put the chat on if you want to, like, if you have a question and you want to just say chat, or you can just talk. I don't much mind any of it. Okay, here we go. So I'm doing from the student view, so it looks like what your stuff should look like, except you won't have the purple box, I guess. Announcements, right? So announcements, if there's a green dot, that means you haven't looked at the announcement yet. And also over here in the to-do world, it lists the announcements that you haven't looked at. So I haven't looked at apparently any of the announcements as a student. That's probably true. So the announcements, I use that 2 or 3 times a week. So it's important to sort of pay attention to them, read them. There's always one at the very beginning of the week, and then probably a couple times, 2 or 3 times during the week, I'll post whatever ideas or information that the administration wants me to get across really quickly. Like this one, they just had me do about severe weather, depending on where you are, like where the students are, right? And the hurricane business and how you get in connect. You need to contact your instructor for extensions and all that business. Anyway, so that's what the announcements are for. So that's useful. The syllabus is up here because, and it's sort of just so it collects a lot of information in one place. So there's like my biography thing, good for me. Then there's something about the textbooks where you can order them from here. But actually, there's a better place to do that from. Gives you all the. Here's what it's useful for. If you go all the way towards the bottom, there's assignment summary, and so what it does is it lists all of the assignments and their due dates, just in a straightforward, without any information that's in the way. So that's what's useful about that. Mostly, though, the modules are the thing that matter the most. So that's where all the work is. If you haven't done this thing, the student attestation, you want to do that as soon as possible. All that is it says it's a quiz, but it's not. But it's like the I'll just show you, right? Like I've read this policy, I understand what I'm supposed to do, stuff like that. And then you accept it and then you be done. So do that if you haven't done that. First thing first. The start here sort of really been, it really only has one thing. It's a tutorial, like a general tutorial about a gen ed course, like where things are. So you can take a look at that. It's also short, so that's useful. But it's not very many other start here things. And the other thing, so the book, this is how I access the book. So that's, except it won't let me because I'm in student mode. But so if you click on it, it'll open up the book for you and you'll be able to go directly to the pages that are assigned. All the assignments are basically out of the book, or all the reading is out of the book, except for articles. Like when you start to find art research articles for the essay, that's the thing that'll you'll also read, obviously. Okay, so there's the book. This is the Q&A, and this is on the discussion board, but you can get to it from here. This is where you, like, if you a question occurs to you, you can't find something, and you like it's the type of question that might help other people, right? You can't find something, you're not sure about what an assignment means, like you're clarifying what it means or whatever. Ask it here, and that way, when I answer it, other people can sort of benefit from it. So that's that. Other than that, if you have something very specific about you or your situation, or right, you should you can use the message box or the inbox, which is on the very far left over here, right? And that message will go directly to my email. It says I don't have it because I have an and then I'll show you where my email is and my text number. So in the syllabus area that we were just at with my biography business, there's my email, and then I have a number you can use for texting. Just tell me your name and class so I know who you are, and then what the deal is. I'm teaching many more classes this fall than I taught in the summer, but I'm also online almost always. So I usually respond fairly quickly to whatever anybody says. So the text will help for that. I mean, that definitely does. But again, I'll be teaching a lot, so I won't be able to do it immediately, like in the summer when this was basically the only thing I was doing. So anyway, there's the text number there and my email address. Okay, so now we're gonna go. The last thing for these are the resources. So basically, I'm thinking what? 1, 2, 3, and then grades. I guess that's where you find your grades. Then it shows you whether you submitted something, and like it's just sitting there, hasn't been graded, or it has been graded, or you're missing it. The resources. I tried to get around it because it won't let me do it. And so the resources are useful because that's where the writing center is. So information just about writing, meaning like anything from grammar to like developing your essays, the writing center is the place for that. Right. So it has all the different elements sort of nicely compartmentalized. So as far as resources go, I would say the writing center is the sort of most important one that we use the most. There are other things in the student resource center too, right? So it's a good place if you have a question about general stuff. It's a good place to look. So you can get that through resources. So syllabus, list of assignments, dates, announcements, I use that. The thing that I will use the most, that we will all use the most, will be the discussion board. Okay, so let's go over each week. Each week is the same pattern. So it has these 3 sections: refresh your knowledge, prepare, and demonstrate, right? So refresh your knowledge are grammar quizzes that don't affect your grade at all, which is why I absolutely encourage people to do them. They're short and they just go over one basic grammar idea. So that can help improve your grammar pretty quickly. And you don't have to worry about the grade. So if you do really bad, it doesn't matter. Because I guess people used to freak out about it. But yeah, it doesn't matter at all. So like sentence fragments is the first one. You do it, it'll show you which ones you got wrong and why. The other thing that goes with this is there's like a mini grammar lesson. Sure. So you have the self-check, which is the quiz. You have the mini grammar lesson, which is a page going over sentence fragments. Pretty concise. So I recommend doing it. Again, not graded, but helpful. So then the next section is sort of the main concept, whatever we're dealing with that week. The lesson. So this week it's basically like, okay, so what is an argument? What does an argument mean? And how do you know whether something's an argument or not? So you read through the lesson, right? Because it's trying to get at a concept, one of the main concepts, and they're usually pretty succinct and interesting, I think. But so each week has a lesson, and then we get to the things where we have to actually do stuff, like the discussion board, and then there's a weekly assignment. Probably hates that. Okay. This week there's 2 discussions, right? The first one, there's usually only 1 discussion per week. This week there's 2 because the first one's an introductory one that's not graded. It's just a stop by and tell us who you are, introduce yourself, say some things. I posted stuff about even more stuff about me, so you can read that. And then there's the actual discussion. So each discussion will have sort of what you need to do, what you need to read and look at in order to do them, right? So here in the textbook, these pages are involved, the lessons involved, and you want to have at least one source and cite it in your discussion. So that's one of the keys. Actually, I'm going to do that also. I'm going to post an example so people know what it looks like, just how like a student example. The idea is each week there's going to be 2 posts. You're going to do an initial post where you respond to questions or ideas or readings. And in that, that's where you want to use a source or two sources, really. You want to use the textbook as a source, and then sometimes you want to pull, you could use the lesson actually also as a source. And then when we start to look at articles, you can start to pull articles and use them as sources. So you want to give like an in-depth initial response to whatever the prompt is. So this week it's all about you thinking about the subject that you're going to pursue, right? The course theme is the environment or the climate. I think um, there's an announcement that just says um, the session theme or whatever. So you should take a look at that. In any event, what it wants you to do is it's trying to get you started with the process of identifying things that are arguable, like arguments that are within the theme that you can pursue. The whole game is trying not to pick something way too broad, trying not to pick something way too narrow. That's so picking something that you'll be able to write this longer essay about and be able to find information about. So this is
For
just a basic beginning. Yeah.
for this specific discussion, it says to pick from the list that you provided in the announcement. Do you care and or mind if we pick something other than what's in the announcement?
Yeah, I'm hoping. Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. In fact, I think I don't even know how many we put in the announcement. You want to no, you can totally pick something else, and you would just want to run it by me, so you could like text me or whatever, or email me, and just so we can make sure. Like I said, my main thing that I help people do is figure out whether it's too broad or too narrow. But if you have something that goes with the theme, connects to it somehow, and it's not on there, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, because
I, ho-
when I was doing that, I was like, man, these topics are hard to talk about. I'm like, I can talk about the environment in any other way, but like I couldn't. I was struggling to like use those topics.
to like argue, right? See, that's the thing, right? So we're trying to make sure, right, that they can be arguable. Let me see what these people. Okay, see what they're, yeah. So that's what I thought. So they're not trying to, which is not great, but they're trying not to communicate like, you have to pick from this. I think they're mostly trying to be like, here's some general ideas. Like,
Oh,
so if you did personal responsibility and environmental, yeah, I totally see what you mean. Like, none of these would make any sense as far as being able to argue about them right away.
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess they're sort of suggesting like areas, and then in that you can be like, come up with some argument about whatever. Somebody should get rid of plastic bags, or all plastic should be made illegal, or something. And then you have an argument that you can sort of work with. Um, yeah, these are all just super broad.
Can I?
Yeah,
Is
so
there?
I would say feel free to find, you know, or work on ones that make sense that you can. The other thing, besides them being too narrow or too broad, is they need to be arguable, right? Like, so what that means is there needs to be like at least two opposing views. So, for example, if I'm like, I don't know, we should clean up the environment. If that's I'm going to argue that. I'm not saying it the right way, because the other side, no, we shouldn't, isn't a real argument, right? Like no one could really argue that. So I need to put it in a language that actually makes it some sort of, arguable thing. Like all, gasoline engines should be, I don't know, made illegal. I like the illegal thing, I guess. Um, Something that people would be like, no, shouldn't do that right now or whatever. So that's the other thing. So you're looking for just sort of the right, not too broad, not too super narrow, but also you want to make sure it has two sides to it.
Yeah, because that's what I was struggling with last night. I was writing mine, and I'm like, all right, I want to do the global warming, but it's hard to find like argument. I was struggling to find an argument where opposed to like my thing was global warming is like real and everything, and humans accelerated, but it's like hard to find where there's the
Like
other
what you,
side of
yeah, yeah, like what to argue about
yeah.
for that. Okay, let me show. So the one thing that I give in so the first top is sort of like the standard, the Chamberlain assignment. It tells you what to do, and then I post. Wait, hold on for the discussion. I try to post like a suggestion to try to help people come up with things that can be argued. Go to this discussion. So here's my idea. So one of the things to do that I teach about trying to come up with something that's arguable is to try to create a question. So like create a research question. So you start thinking a different way already because you're asking questions. But you also want to try and start the question with one of these words. Is, are, will, do, does, or should. Just because if you start with one of those words, you're already on track to creating something that might have two sides to it. Right. Should plastic bags be illegal or something, right? Should something, that's how you start to get into the mind frame of things that can actually be argued. So that's one strategy that I try to get people to do. So if you can come up with a couple questions that have to do with the subject itself or some part of the subject, right? Because it's such a big thing, like climate change is very big. You want to start to think about like specific parts of that. Like local governments should pay people not to drive their cars. I mean, that's a little narrow, but still. So you're trying to figure out some part of or aspect of this whole giant. Yeah, because the whole idea of like if it's real or not, we're done with that, which is probably a good thing.
Right.
Took us long enough, but yeah, so that's my thing. You just think of a subject and you're like, how can I turn this into a question? Will this is it too late to do anything about climate change? That would be something. Super depressed. But like that's still pretty, I don't know, it's still pretty big. I would say that's closer to something that's doable though. Than like paying people not to drive. Paying people not to drive is sort of too narrow. So I would, in the middle would be something like towns need to eliminate exhaust from the population. And this is the way they could do it. Like here's a couple ideas, something like that. I don't know. I'll type. I think better when I'm writing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are my example, and I use driverless cars as an example. So I just had that as a thing, and then I just came up with different questions. Some are better, or weaker or stronger. Is driverless transportation safe and effective? Should people be encouraged to switch to driverless transportation, or will driverless cars become the standard transportation? I don't like the first one so much, but so anyway, I would recommend trying to create a question or create a few questions. And for the post, for your initial post, it says you basically want to come up with two sort of ideas and then sort of talk about them a little bit, like what your stand is, what's your opinion. So if I was doing this initial post, I'd probably take these two questions. Should people be encouraged to switch over? And is it safe and effective? Right. And so for each one, I would say, I don't know, what do I think? And I'd come up with an opinion that I think and give a couple reasons. And I would try to find maybe an article quickly or something. Probably find some information from an article that I might be able to use in my post.
Yeah, what I was struggling with was like I keep thinking about like I know where I stand, but I'm trying to like think for other people like what would be the opposite? Like what would be the argument? 'Cause I feel like that's where I would put my main focus in this assignment is because I'm trying to like I know what to look up for to prove like my point, like my belief or whatever.
Right,
And
but there has to be an opposing view, and you're like
right,
trying to think of. So all that means is you have to change the way you're thinking about or like framing whatever the thing is that you're thinking like of doing, and that's what I mean. Like trying to get specific. Like, since it affects so many different things, you can try to pick, one thing. Like you could pick electricity or something, right, and be like, okay, what are ways that like electricity needs to change in order to lower, the gases in the air or something like that. So picking just one area, or like in cars would be another one, like gasoline, sort of something. So trying to focus it down rather than, because if you try to just stick with climate change super broad, it's really hard to sort of deal with, because like I said, we're done with the, is it a problem? Is it not a problem? There's still some arguments on the next level. There's arguments about like, should we get rid of all gasoline cars, right? Like
That would make it, it's so complex doing just like that climate change, because there's so many levels. And then like in the reading, I put that in my post. I'm like, a good argument is supposed to be complex, but you don't want it to be too complex, because you said there's only so much you can argue in a one page paper.
yeah, I think that's true. Like right. But you're right. You sort of, you need, that's in the, but the, what I think you're talking about a little bit is the focusing on it, right? Like
Right.
if you can focus, then suddenly it becomes like what you're calling complex is like, it's true because there's a bunch of different parts to it. But so in order to argue it, you need to simplify it. And one of the ways you do that is you pick just some sector of it, right? Like
Right.
one subject inside of it, so that you
Okay.
focus on that. And then you're not oversimplifying it really. You're just putting all your emphasis on one thing. So if your entire idea was about like dealing with gasoline or something, like we absolutely need to stop using gasoline in the next year. And then you get like, that's an argument that you could make, and other
I
people would
think
be
that
like, that's
happened-
ridiculous.
That's what happened to me. Like I ended up, because I started last week reviewing this topics and everything,
Right.
and I ended up choosing like airplanes, like the effect that has like on global warming. And but then like as I'm like digging deeper into like the chapters and the reading and everything, I'm like, wait a second, I think I need to like change this a little bit, because just focusing on airplanes and that their carbon release doesn't
too
re-
narrow.
it's too narrow. So that-
Exactly. So it's too narrow. So you're
So I
here.
changed
So
it up.
yeah. So if you step up to it, have you broadened it yet or not yet?
I did. I decided I think I'm gonna do something like with still talking about air travel, but I think I want to do like opposing it. We should do more public transportation of like buses and stuff.
Okay. So that's what I mean. Okay, good. That's actually a good idea. So now you're like talking about transportation
Mhm.
in general. And so
Right.
now you get to talk about way more things, right, than
Mhm.
just airplanes.
Right.
And I think that's and I don't think it's too broad. I think that's probably right in the, like in order to, to help solve global warming, we need to improve our transportation,
Right.
which
I still
means
haven't
getting
like
rid of
grasped
this.
100%, but I feel like now I'm finally just going in the right direction after.
Yeah, that's
all
good.
that.
Well, that's the whole game, is just trying to settle on something that makes sense to you, that's clear, and that's a clear argument.
Will that
But
have an
that's
impact though? Like random now sidetracking this, will that have an impact? Because obviously I submitted my work for this week, and I realized that
Oh no.
go look
No,
for different. Okay.
well, it depends. Do you mean like the assignment or the discussion or both?
Like yeah, basically in the discussion, clearly my stance or what I put down isn't
Yeah,
a
don't worry
good
about that.
one, and I'm gonna change it now this week. That
Yeah,
one.
that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you just want to make sure there's enough that you have a substantial post, and as long as it's enough, then you're fine.
Okay.
Even though you totally change for next week, that's not a problem.
Yeah, that's what
Because
that's
that's
what
sort of what this is about. This week is supposed to be about that, right? Sort of trying to figure out something, and just when I write, like ideas occur to me, like as I write, which is why I always tell people just to start writing things, and your mind works in a different way, and it'll start to churn up stuff. Because if I sit here by myself and be like, I need to think of this argument about climate change, I can think all day and nothing will happen. So I'll just start typing something. Like climate change is all about ice melting and how the water's getting too hot. And so then, I start to just come up with a bunch of things, and then eventually an idea or something more solid will show up. Yeah, I don't know. That's not bad though. That's a good one. The transportation idea, that or fuel. I mean, fuel is the way I was thinking, but I think transportation is more interesting.
Yeah,
I
I feel like I'll definitely talk about the carbon dioxide too, just because I think that's like a big thing in it, right?
Yeah. What else?
I was thinking about like I wanted to change mine, because what I did was like I was doing it and I was like I spent like hours on it, and I'm like, man, I don't think a discussion post is supposed to be this complex with the way I was thinking. And
Right.
so I'm like, all right, I went to sleep on it, and then when I woke up, I'm in my nursing class, and I'm like, man, I should have did this, I should have did this, and
Right. So do you have, well, yeah, you can totally check. Do you have an idea? Like, so you don't have to worry about what you wrote for the discussion post. It's basically there just to get people's minds going.
Yeah.
Right. So you have that. But if you do want to end up with, and that's the other thing I was going to mention, that for the actual assignment, right, it would be good that you have a better idea. So the discussion post you do, and then you're like, maybe I'll do something else. You don't really need to screw around with it, meaning for the discussion post, you could just leave it. But
Right.
what you do want to have is for the assignment. So the assignment is they're calling it a proposal, right? So here's the idea, and it gives you a template. So anytime there's a template, there's quite a few actually. So for the assignment, all you really need to do is use it. So you open it up and then you can like fill it in, and that's because it's already in the right format, right? So this is already an APA format. And then so then you go through and now it's just trying to get you to focus on, okay, so if you did your discussion post and now you have different ideas, this is sort of where you would like to start narrowing it down. So you have to pick a certain debate, right? You're picking a position on the debate. So, right, if you're doing, right, transportation needs to be changed. This is it. So you're trying to explain it in one sentence without using what your position is. So you can just go through this and fill it out. And this is also supposed to be helping people to figure out and narrow, what they're actually going to be writing about. And while you're doing this, it's helpful because it starts to force you to decide whether your thing is too broad or it's too narrow. And if you're like, no one could disagree with me, then you're probably have something way too broad and you need to sort of narrow it down. And then, and then all who the audience will be and so on. And then you're trying to find, I think they want you to have, search phrases. That's where we're at. Okay. So search phrases, because the game is going to be during next week is to find sources that you can use, like scholarly articles, which I will post stuff about. And you want to find at least two that are against your position. So that's why you're trying to figure out at this point what your position is and what people might say against it.
Right.
And so just fill out. So that's what I say. You fill out the template, and that's the assignment for the week. So you have a discussion post. You have, and I don't know if I said this now or not, but for the discussion post, like for the discussion area, that's where I put all sorts of things. So that's usually like the most, where things are happening the most, right? Because I guess we're simulating discussion or something. But that's where I'll drop a bunch of ideas so that's my initial one about creating the question. Then I did this super short video about searching and finding articles, and I'll probably repost it this next week when people but I just also felt some people found it helpful just to start looking in the library for articles, because then they would have ideas of what to argue about, right? So if you type in, climate change, or you type in gasoline and climate or whatever, that can help some people. But anyway, so every day, mostly, I'll drop something into the discussion board that's supposed to help us with either, writing the discussion, working on the assignment, ideas, and then also actual writing techniques things. But so that's where I will and then like this thing that we're doing right now where I'm recording this video, I will post those there too.
Okay.
Post this in a couple places. All right, other questions?
For the discussion, do you want us to have a source when we are responding to our classmates, or is it more of just conversing on what they posted?
I would recommend that.
Okay.
Because here's so yeah, if you want to do well on the discussion board for every week, the key is well, one of the keys is that when you're responding to people, like to one of your classmates, if you can use a source in your response, then you're golden, because that's sort of like the best way. Because what they're trying to get people to do is to get away from, hey, I really liked your post. That seems cool, right? Like, we want to say something that's substantial. And if you have to use, or if you make yourself have to use, like, a quote from an article as part of your response, it shows that you're doing that, right? That you're doing more than just, saying, hey, that was a neat post. So I always recommend doing that. It's not the end of the world if you don't do that. You can still do a good long post, and then that works too. That's the next thing, and I'll drop that like in the next half hour or 15 minutes, is I'll put the rubric, even though I know people could go look at it, but I've turned it in just to a document so you can see exactly like what you're being graded on for the discussion board. So I'll post that in the discussion board world right after this. What else? Other questions? This is exciting, people. You're the best group so far.
Oh, I do have a
Anyway,
question.
go for it.
So when we're looking for the sources, does it have to be, are we only allowed to search in the library? Are we like allowed to use Google or anything?
You can use Google. Here, the game's going to be scholarly sources, which means anything, like if you get to the end of an article, it needs to have a bunch of information and resources.
Right.
Right. Not a lot of things do. Like newspapers don't really work. So the big vision is you're going to need, I think, 5 scholarly sources, no matter what. So that's like finding academic journals. So that's why if you go through Chamberlain's library, you should be able to find them. But also you can find them through Google too.
Yeah.
Sometimes what I do is I search Google and I find a great article that's academic, and then I go back to the library and put it in and find it in the library, because sometimes you can't access it if you're just in Google, because you have to have whatever subscription, something. So, and what I tell people is, so you're looking eventually you're going to have these 5 scholarly sources. And as long as you have those and use those, you can also have other sources. You could actually also use a magazine or something from a magazine, or like a legitimate, credible magazine or a newspaper or whatever. So at the moment, though, you're trying to, well, right now, you're just trying to shape and figure out what your argument's going to be. But yeah, I would say, as a general guideline, I also have that. I post that next week, I think, about what a scholarly source is. But the general rule that I'm using is that at the end of the article, there is like a resource list, like references. Also, if there's, footnotes, stuff like that. That's how you know it's a scholarly source. That's one of the, so that's what the idea is, I guess. But for now, I would just, I don't know, I might try the library for you just to help see if you come up, or Google, just to help you find articles that might help you figure out what your argument's going to be. And then you'll turn in this template that you filled out with all the stuff, and then I try to grade stuff by like, well, it's the beginning of next week. And I make comments on all of the assignments, so you can look at those and see. Obviously it matters more when we get to like the rough draft and everything, but I do make comments on each of the assignments and try to help people, strengthen their arguments or shape it or whatever. Anything else? Are we good for now? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll survive until tomorrow.
Okay. Did you already do your discussion post? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. But now I'm like, after this discussion with us,
Yeah.
I'm like rethinking the whole thing.
You have a different, okay. You can always, again, also, you can always like email me and just say, I'm thinking about doing this or whatever. And then I can respond,
I'll
at
probably
any
do that,
time.
like later tonight. I'll probably
Yeah,
do that.
totally. Yeah, absolutely. Just, and I'll probably, when I get a sec, I can go look and see what you posted. And then, so when you do it, email me, I'll sort of know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do that anytime. I'm especially at this point, students often do this at this, like literally at this point in this, like at the first week and week and a half or whatever, just to make sure they get, you get solid with a research idea, an arguable thing.
Right.
So feel free to do that. That's totally fine. Good.
Yep.
All right. Well, cool. I hope people come back on, next Tuesday. So every Tuesday we have this much fun. But all right. Well, I will again contact me. You can ask me questions, email through the message box or whatever. But hopefully I'll see people on next Tuesday. Good. Have a good rest of your day. See how to stop this part.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. See you later. Stop, I said. Oh.